Good evening, everybody. In the essence of time, I want to get started on time, make sure that I'm conscious of everybody's time today. My name's Eduardo Mendoza. I'm the city engineer. I'm going to be giving a quick presentation today on some improvements that we've made for a subdivision on Verdin Avenue for Tanglewood subdivision. But before I get started, I'd like to introduce a couple people here today. I'd like to recognize our commissioner for District 2, Joaquin Zamora.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. We appreciate it. Thank you.
We have our city manager, Isaac Tawil, here today. Thank you, Isaac, for coming.
Thanks for coming out.
I have our assistant city manager, Michelle Rivera, is here today. And some of my staff, Bilkio Zeran, Jorge Gutierrez, Robert Garza, our drainage engineer, are also present today. After this presentation, if you have any questions, staff can talk to you. Even if it's not about this subdivision or any city-related items, we can help take those down and then get that referred out to the appropriate department. So I appreciate you all taking the time today. As I said, we're here for Verdin Avenue drainage improvements. Want to talk to you about the existing conditions. So this is a single road with a cul-de-sac. The existing condition that you all had before 2018 was a single 18-inch pipe with one curb inlet. As you all know, during that event, you all had some rain or some ponding in that area. And so we had several projects that the city undertook, either through a drainage bond, drainage fee. We took on a lot of projects. And so I want to go over those with you today, just so you know that the improvements that we've done out there, make sure that you know the city has been working for you. So the first step we did was we looked at the local area. We wanted to make sure that we addressed the area right there in Tanglewood or on Verdin Avenue. And so what we did is we extended the pipe to include 2 drainage inlets to bring that surface water in sooner. And then on top of that, what we did, we have a detention pond right by your subdivision, and we added a check valve. And so what this check valve does is whenever the system gets to 100%, and either starts coming back, that valve will close and not allow the water to come back into that street. And so that's an important aspect of this. Not only do we improve the drainage going out, but at any time we're running at 100%, there's that safety check to make sure that water doesn't come back into your roadway and into your subdivision. And so this was completed in the first quarter of 2024. When we look at the regional drainage improvements, now we're looking at a bigger impact to make sure that we're addressing not only your localized area, but the whole drainage area to where your subdivision is at. And so we added approximately 1,600 linear feet of channel. We widened that out to about 160 to 200 feet wide, depending on the areas. As you can see, those areas are a fairly long distance. The check valve, there was also another check valve installed further down the road to make sure that we stop that water from coming back whenever the system is running full. So that's a second check valve to help the Verdin neighborhood. These projects were completed in the first quarter of 2022. And then when we look at a bigger regional area to make sure that we're addressing not only the local area and then the neighboring surrounding area, the city has also looked at making sure that we're having a regional impact, that we're assisting the whole drainage system. And when you look at that, while this project is a lot further north than your subdivision, it has an impact to drop the surface water in your subdivision. And so what we did there at the Northwest Blueline Regional Detention Facility is we added about 5,500 linear feet of channel improvement to the Northwest Blueline, and then we dug out a detention pond. So as the water starts flowing down, it gives us an area to store that water before we get that back into the system and have it head out to the county system. And that's approximately 2,400 linear feet of channel clearing to the downstream receiving system. And this project was recently completed of May 2025. Right now, I think they're just seeding some of the grass out there. So we have one future drainage improvement that we want to add. It's another check valve, and this would be the third check valve. Fairly low cost. We have it in the budget. We're working on getting that to construction. This is a new check valve. If you look on the bottom corner of this, it looks purple. possibly blue. That will give you, help the service elevation in your all's subdivision whenever we have the system running full again. And so with that, just put up a couple of our drainage engineer's phone number and his project manager, which is Jorge Gutierrez. If y'all would want to take a picture of that, they're the ones responsible for our drainage system. You can also contact me at the same phone number. And I know that was a short presentation, but I wanted to leave some time for y'all to take any questions that you may have in particular to this or anything else related right now. And so I'll open the floor for y'all to speak. Yes, sir.
Family lives on 2612 on Butterford, and very especially on Butterford, there's one inlet between, or a set of inlets between 29th and 26th. And they, I don't know if the city maintains them or whatever, but there's a lot of oak trees in that area, a lot of leaves dropping in that area and going to it. So I'm sure that you all are out there cleaning up.
What we can do, so if I'm hearing the question correctly, Mr. Zuniga? Through that area. So what we can do, I think it's in another neighborhood. We can get the address at the end of this meeting. We can go look at that system. We can have our Public Works Department go and pop those lids, make sure that those systems are cleaned out. And then if it's something we need to periodically do, we can put that, ask them to put it on their maintenance rotation. And then we can grab your contact to make sure that we follow up.
Maybe the benefit of that was saying that you guys are out there cleaning, but you never know. And I'm glad you mentioned that you're going to put it on the schedule.
Yes, and what we'll do is we could take it in and have it verified after this, next week, as we get time to go look at it.
There's a detention pond in the back, and then there's one on Umbrella Bird that throughout the street. It's very slow, I guess, raining on the street itself.
Yes, sir. So what I would say, most newer subdivisions do have detention ponds. Detention ponds are the HOA's responsibility. What we can do is make sure that if we see that it's weedy or that it's not well kept, we can put that through our code enforcement and make sure that the HOA is maintaining that detention pond.
I don't think there's an HOA there.
Okay, if it's a public detention pond, we'll verify that and we'll make sure we maintain it. But most subdivisions will have their own private detention pond, and what they release their drainage water at a controlled rate into our system. But we'll verify that, we'll take that information down, and appreciate the comments, sir. Anybody else today?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I don't know if you can go back to a different slide. Definitely. The one that's titled Regional Drainage Improvements. The one before that. Okay. So the northwest Blueline, that travels north, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm sure you recall the hurricane that we had in 2020, July of 2020. That whole area, I live one street back from Verdin. I live on Umbrella Bird. Our whole area was underwater when a lot of the part, I know the southern part of the city was in worse shape, at least our area was underwater. So my question, I guess, is, has the northwest blue line been widened, or when will it be widened where it crosses Auburn? Because there is a bottleneck there where it crosses, where it is definitely not 100 to 200 feet wide.
So right now, these are the sections we've widened to get that additional capacity. We can look at additional projects, but right now, this is what has been done. When you talk about the 2020, as you can see, this project was completed in 2025. So in the future storms, you'll see that improvement in 2020. This improvement was not in place at that time.
Yeah, because that bottleneck is going to continue to create problems as it did then.
Okay. We can take a note of that.
Yeah. I'm sure that it's an issue dealing with the landowner. So I think it's,
Yeah, right now, that bottleneck area is private property.
Yeah.
And so it's something that It's not in the plans right now, but if that ever converts, or if we ever purchase that, we can look at widening the section you're talking about.
Yeah, I know that it got widened after that, that hurricane a little bit, but by no means enough to handle hurricane level type floods. And, you know, we were backed up for, I think, the people who live in the Verdin area, that whole Madison Park, I think we were backed up for like 2.5, 3 days.
Yes.
You know, with water, not a little water, a lot of water. Like you couldn't drive down the street at all.
And I think what you'll note is that this project is after that, and so we should see those improvements from this point coming forward. In the last rain that we just recently had last month, we think we saw a lot of success, and that's one of the reasons we're having this meeting is we saw that the improvements that we have put in place have dropped the surface water elevation. On top of that, if you notice within, you know, and this is a rough estimate, within an hour or so, that water was gone, and that hadn't been in previous storm events. And so we think we had a really good success rate. With the money we invested, we saw that improvement then, and so we wanted to just kind of get the feedback. So appreciate what your comments are.
Yeah, how much water, Eduardo, and this is Isaac Towell, I'm the city manager here, but do you recall how much water was dropped at that last rain event? And can you talk about how this area performed when that came in? Because my recollection is the pictures of what we saw in this area is that the system performed as we wanted it to. It held the water and released it into the system in a way that did serve to protect the homes. And I think, if my memory is correct, we received more water in that event than you would expect from a typical hurricane.
So I think you're correct. Thanks for putting me on the spot with a lot of information. I'm going to do my best to answer some of that. So one, we had different varying intensities of rain. Down south, we had about 13 inches. All the way to Tres Lagos, we had about 8.5 inches. This is somewhere in between. We had somewhere of that intensity over a 2-hour period. Now, it's not only the inches of rain we received, it's how fast we received that rain. And that's really what hurts us the most, is when we receive rain at that intensity in a short duration, the system is inundated really quick. And so Isaac's right. What we saw there is, for a moment, the system was full. And clearly, you know, within an hour or so, the system drained out, and we saw it perform to what we had modeled, what the engineers had gone through and said, if we make this investment, we're going to see the improvements in this area. And so I think when you talk about the 2020 event, you talk about water standing for several days, and that definitely changed. And I think it goes to what Isaac is saying, is the improvement from days to hours is a huge impact. It's a huge benefit to the residents. And so that's some of the improvements we saw. I think you had a question back there, sir?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for what you've done for the past 20 years. I'm on Verdin Avenue on the cul-de-sac there. And the engineers, I mean, they're there when we call, and they help us out. Appreciate what you all are doing in the back, and the bottleneck that the gentleman over there was talking about, where the Lima's property is, and the Lube area there. I'm sure you guys are still working on that, trying to get it wider or whatever. My other concern is, what are we doing about 29th Street and Xenops, that water that runs down from Xenops and 29 over onto Verdin? Is there a way to channel that water somewhere else? Or I noticed that on the corner on Trenton, they put a new business there, and the slope coming off the business is like a waterfall. I know they put like a retention pond there or whatever they're supposed to do now, but all that water now is going to flow. It's going to look for a place. I don't know if it's going to go north or head towards Verdin, and then we're going to be fighting that.
So as I do several of these public meetings, I mean, that's one of the comments I get is, you know, there's a development that has come in, and they look a little higher. They look, you know, you see development, and the first thought is they're going to flood me out. But the one thing that we do have here in the city of McAllen is drainage policies. And so those developments actually provide benefit to you. Is what they have to do is the same thing your subdivision has done. I'm gonna take my water, I'm gonna store it, and then I'm gonna release it at a controlled rate. Now, there are certain portions that will bleed off into the right of way, but it's a lot more minimal than what it was before that development started there. And so when you mentioned that, and you said, and I'm glad you mentioned, there's a detention pond, and because that's where the water is directed. That's where the water is gonna be stored before it goes to your subdivision. At some point in time, that used to probably, if, I'm gonna take your word that you saw that water running through your neighborhood or going across the street. Now that water should be channeled to the detention pond, or majority of it, stored there and controlled, released at a controlled rate. What I'll do, the other comment about 29th Street and crossing Xenops is I'll take that down, that observation, and I'll get back with the engineers, and if we get your information, we can get you a better response on that. I don't have that off the cuff, and I do apologize, but I'd have to look at that on the map.
Yeah, because I wonder when it rains, like the rain we got, I'm like, is that all my neighbor's backyard water? Whose water is that coming down Verdin? It's a lot of water for our little neighborhood, our little street. It's just a lot of water
Coming down from 29.
coming through Verdin into our little drainage.
Good thing you're sitting by our deputy city engineer, because he could
Yeah.
probably take your info and we could give you
Yeah, I just don't
a
know
response.
de dónde viene tanta agua por esta callecita, where the river.
And I think the good thing, and I know I'm trying to be as positive as I can, I'm a positive guy, but
Yes.
the good thing is that water, at least right now, has a place to go. It has the additional storage, but if there's any additional improvements we can make, Mr. Cruz is a good person to start with, and then he'll get
Oh,
with me,
absolutely.
and we'll try to make those improvements.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, sorry about that.
That's okay. Frank Garza, I live here at Lark Landing. A comment and a question. But I can attest to the last rain that we had. It was incredible because it was flash flooding, and I've been through several hurricanes, so that you can have the best system in the world and it's just not gonna stop flash flooding. But I will say that the amount of time that it took the water that was over my curb, and from the time that it took to drain was fantastic. So what y'all are doing, keep doing it. I even some of my neighbors are commenting, we're at the man, and I in my camera, in my ring, you could actually see the water over the curb, and just see it drain dramatically. So good job. I can see that we noticed a difference. I noticed a difference from even 4 or 5 years ago. And my second question, just so I can better understand the process, but are these projects done strategically, maybe, or by priority, or like, hey, we're going to do this one because it'll feed off better to this one? Is that something that's kind of done? I'm not an engineer by any means, but
Definitely, there's a strategic way we go at this. And so one, out of the 2018 event, and before the 2018 event, every time we have a storm event, we document the areas that had inundation. We more or less know where they're at, but it's always good to document that through every event. Rain intensity, it helps our modeling. Mr. Cruz and Robert are very good at drainage, and so when we do this model, we direct our engineers, we hire other engineers to help us out. And when we model this, we're not only looking, as you can see, as a localized problem, right? That localized improvement we made of Verdin helps Verdin out, but it doesn't help Lark Landing, right? And so then when you look at the channel, we say, okay, how do we drop that service elevation from that 2018 event that we had a watermark at X elevation? And that watermark, if it's at Verdin at 118, it's at your house at 118. The systems are connected. And so when we make the channel improvement, Robert and his team know, okay, well, that's a 2-foot drop. And that's no longer above the curb line, that's below the curb line. And so we look at that now, a localized region, and then we look at a bigger region, and how do we drop that surface elevation for the whole drainage basin? And so I think you make a very good point, is it's just not a haphazard, we're gonna fix this little problem right here at Verdin. Staff has a bigger picture. Of course, we wanna help Verdin, but we wanna help the community. The dollars that we're spending here are dollars not only for one area, They're meant to enrich or to make the quality of life, for everybody, better. And I want to make a point about what you said about that water dropping. It's not just an engineering came here and miraculously your water dropped. There's a whole team behind here. There's a public works department that has to go maintain and mow those ditches. And if they're not mowed before that rain, that system doesn't perform the way it did. If they're not out there cleaning those inlets, and I don't do that, it's not our department. We're wearing ties and we're doing the math. There's some hard-working people here in the city that are out there cleaning your inlets, cleaning your ditches, picking up brush, making sure the leaves are not going down drains. And so I applaud that team because that system won't work. It can be designed as good as you want. But if we're not maintaining it on a daily basis, and there's a huge cost to that maintenance that is not seen and not heard of, oh, we spent $2 million on this canal. We're spending $100,000 every year to maintain that canal. And when you add that cost in perpetuity, it's a big expense, but it's expense well spent. And we applaud commissioners and we applaud the city manager for making sure that they fund us correctly and that we have the system that operates correctly. And I'll take some other questions.
Yeah, Eduardo, I want to piggyback on what you just said and emphasize McAllen Shines. And that initiative for our residents to take ownership of the city, the aesthetics of the city, and help us maintain it. You know, when you cut your grass, not allowing the clippings to enter that system is very, very important. And we know those of you who are here are some of our most responsible citizens. And so we also applaud our citizens for helping us with this hard work that we do, because, you know, we're here every day working, but you're here living here every day. And we know that those of you who are here really care and really help us. And so thank you for being proactive supporters of initiatives like that and helping us keep these systems up and running.
You make a good point. Very good point. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What is a timeline, if you have one, to finish the blue line?
The blue line, right now, we don't have any improvements planned for that. We have it at the width we want. I don't see other than where the right-of-way we discussed, someone brought up the little choke. That one last little choke is probably the last piece on that. There's a little bit of right-of-way that would have to be purchased. We're investigating that. It's there. The next improvement, as we showed, is the check valve that we want a little further downstream.
Theoretically, blue line is supposed to run north, right?
Yes, sir.
It doesn't. It doesn't flow north, right?
It flows north.
It does?
Yes, sir.
I thought it could flow south.
We have a split further down where we're putting the check valve. Let me see.
For the longest time, that was the problem, it wasn't flowing north.
So we have, and I'm just gonna go up to the board real quick and point. So here where we have the check valve, we have a system that comes like this. But for the most part, that heads north. And then there's a connection where it heads, where that check valve is at, east. Thank you for helping with my direction. I should be better at
The
directions.
blue line is gonna head to that check valve.
If the system fills up, so when you get to 100% capacity, because remember, we're going into a county system. And so McAllen's putting in water, then Edinburgh's putting in water, Elsa's putting in water, and as you go down, we're further downstream. And they have a control structure that says, McAllen, you can only put X amount of water through the system, and they do that through a structure. And you can only physically put so much water through that structure, that the system says, okay, it's time to start filling up the canal, and it's time to start filling up the detention ponds, and it's time to start filling up the reservoirs. And as you get to that point, then the streets are your next place to start storing water. And what that's saying is the water's coming back because we don't have capacity upstream. And as soon as we have capacity upstream, then it starts coming down again. That's when you see water coming backwards. Those are on when we mention a hurricane, when we mention having intense rains for not only 2 hours, but 8, like Harlingen had, they had 18 inches of water. that's when you may see the system back up in a very intense, very unique or once-in-a-lifetime type event.
So they clearing up that bottleneck on Auburn, is it gonna help us on Verdin?
What it does is it helps drop your surface elevation, because what it does is it allows more capacity to go through there. And so you have more storage. And so that's why we have the engineers that model the hydraulics. What they do is, they'll take the 2018 storm event, and there's no improvement. And we know the watermark was at a certain elevation because we go out during the storms and we mark those elevations. And then when we model this, we say, okay, we're gonna add more capacity in these strategic areas, and where does that surface elevation go? And so we know, based on that modeling, we see improvements. And then what we do beyond that is, when we have an event like last month, the guys went out and took water surface elevations again. They modeled it for that new intensity and say, okay, so now we know that we had an improvement. We checked the model with what we see in the future. And so it's a continuous thing that Robert and his team have to go through to make sure there's those improvements. And so we have those verified, but it is, I understand what you're telling me. Well, I'll go for it.
I just want to make a comment. Over the years that I've been privileged to serve as commissioner, invariably I received several phone calls or texts about the Northwest Blueline as it relates between, let's say, is it Pelican, all the way north to Trenton, and then the lateral that runs just south of Robin, east to Bicentennial. The comment that they make is the water's right at the surface, it's about to crest and go over. I always reply, don't worry. It's built to a capacity and engineered in a way that it's going to stay there, but it's not going to overflow and jump the banks. Can you kind of maybe address that? So just for public consumption here, so they understand the concept of a lot of what you've already talked about, the engineering and the wait time and then the flow as it goes north.
Definitely. I think I touched base on it a little bit, but I'll go through it again. I just want to make sure that we address that we have our Commissioner Rowley here. If you want to just, nice to you, just to make sure that we have everybody here. So what I would say, Commissioner, is as you see those systems, there's the banks, and they get, we go on the radio, we drive around town, we got 100%. So as I said, the next level, there's a high point on that bank, and then there's a subdivision. Our streets are lower than those canals. And so your backup to that, once the system starts backing up, is you're gonna start getting water in the detention ponds. And then as the second check or safety check, the streets start taking on water. And so those banks are high enough to where we know where the water's gonna go, and that we're checking that they're not coming over the top uncontrolled. They're coming the way the system was designed. And so as we do subdivisions, our subdivision engineer didn't come through here. Part of the team that Robert has to manage is our development engineer. And not that he's his boss, but as they're doing developments, that's something that we have to be conscious about, is making sure that when we build streets, that they're built at an elevation so that when the ditches are running full, that they are the next safety check for that. And so that's a good point, Commissioner.
Can I add just something to that
Yes,
also
ma'am.
as well? So when you have, you asked about criteria, and there is a number of criteria that we use to make sure that we are prioritizing projects in an order that, one is, is there going to be water in the streets? Okay, well, is there going to be water in the front yard? Because all of that is part of what we consider to be drainage. We don't want it to get into the house, and that's why when we issue building permits, your foundation is supposed to be 18 inches above the curb as well, because you have that 3 layers of built-in safety to try to keep the water out of your house. So that's another layer there.
Any other questions? And so what, oh, go for it.
I've got one that's not related to that.
No, go for it.
Part of it is, we're all having to purchase flood insurance. It's not cheap. A lot of people don't purchase it because they're in a high area, but we, if we want to maintain our homes, have to. Is there any way that the city could help the residents through the county and city taxes kind of bring down or give us a percentage bring down our taxes, our valuations. It could help us offset that.
And so, I'm gonna ask a question. Is the reason, are you required to carry flood insurance? 'Cause
No,
you're-
no, we're not required. But because of the situation that we have with the drainage, we have to.
Well, and to be fair, there is no foolproof way to say that you will never flood. If
Right.
we get a
No, we are.
5,000-year storm,
We're in the valley. That's-
everybody's going to flood.
everybody's
So
gonna
that's
flood.
something.
But
that
we are
have to-
more potential to it.
And we do not control the valuation of your property. That's the appraiser, the Hidalgo County Appraisal District. They send appraisers out there, and they're the ones that set that. As far as the tax rates, our commission has lowered your tax rates the last 2 years, four years, I think.
4 years,
consecutively,
4 years.
Yes. And so I know it's not a lot, but it's, you know.
They never know what else.
And we do also, some of our economic sales tax goes to help offset property taxes as well. If you look on the bottom of your bill, it'll tell you how much more you would have paid if we didn't dedicate a portion of the house and sales tax to your property taxes.
Yeah, I saw that.
What I can answer,
I know.
what I can answer to that, and it's probably not the answer you want to hear, but, so there's a decision to be made on how you spend drainage dollars, right? And so we offer a subsidy for drainage, that takes away from drainage projects. And so what we try to do is, one, through our development policies that I talked about earlier, is if you're in a flood zone, we ask you to take that subdivision out of the flood zone, so that you have the choice to decide whether you want to purchase flood insurance or not. I have the choice to purchase flood insurance. I live right by a drain ditch myself. I live in the city of McAllen. But that's a personal decision, right? And so and commission can always make any decision they want, but if we start subsidizing flood insurance, it takes away from those drainage dollars. And so it's a balancing act where the best investment for the city is making sure that our drainage system is working, that we're maintaining that drainage system. But it's a good question. I think there's commissioners here that heard that, and they could take that back. But thank you for the question. Is there any other questions?
Yes, sir. In the back.
How are we paying for this?
For this-
I shouldn't, he's not right, but, grants, what's up, are we getting grants or maybe?
All of the above. We have about 6 different funding sources. We use
Great.
CDBG funding, we use drainage fee, we do capital improvement projects, we use development corporation monies. What else am I forgetting?
So one of the best ones, Michelle's about to say is there's 6, right? And so one of the best funding mechanisms that the city commission put together through our ACM, help push this policy through, is we have a drainage fee. And so each development, or each house and each commercial development is assessed a drainage fee that, based on the amount of impervious area, you pay $1 or $2 roughly. I think it's at about $1.90, the base rate, Mario?
Base is roughly at 125.
125. And so we take those dollars, and then Michelle, she's right. There's CDBG money, which is community block grant money. There's grants out there that we leverage with those drainage fee dollars.
These guys have been very successful in leveraging millions of dollars in drainage monies from the federal government and from the state sources.
I appreciate that.
There's different sources, but those are some of the creative financing things that this city has come up with that help to continue the project, to continue the maintenance, and allow us to continue putting these projects together so that we don't fall behind. I mean, that's the one thing we don't want to do, is we don't want to fall behind because, everybody hears this on the news. Storms are getting more intense, and so our design standards have to keep increasing. The money has to keep increasing. And so I think as the city leaders that we have here, Michelle and City Commission, we're making sure that we're trying to stay ahead of this. And so thank you, sir. I think you had a question up front?
Yeah, looking at the map, going back to the Verdin.
You want me to go to the,
Yeah, that one right there.
okay.
Right there at 29th and Trenton, the southeast corner of that intersection. It's kind of we'll call it a triangular type piece on the corner. And then there's a daycare that's right below that's got that trapezoidal shape. Now, when you actually visit those sites, the corner piece is, there's nothing there except some mesquite trees. They might have cut them down a month ago, but it usually collects water quite a bit and holds, because I used to throw mosquito discs in there because it's just terrible. I guess, and then also behind that daycare, they have a fence, but then there's still somewhat of a triangular piece of land. It does belong to them. Is there any thought to maybe acquiring those two odd shapes to add to the Verdin RDF as far as like a holding pond? Being that those are pieces of land that nobody can really use or are using?
At the moment, no. What I would say is there's a private development there, and they have run a business and an interest. Typically, when we're looking at projects here at our staff level, unless there's a great demand, we're not looking to take someone out of business. But we can look at that, see if there's any possibilities. But what I would say is I'm not trying to buy a business out because someone has found a location that they feel they're having a successful business. And that's us balancing a lot of interests. But we can definitely look at that.
Yeah, no, that's not what I'm saying, is to buy them out.
I think he's saying there's some.
Yeah, there's a little vacant traffic.
It's a traffic zone, so if you were to finish that off, make a right triangle with a rectangle on the left side, the triangular part on the right, they don't ever use that. That's never used.
We can definitely look at that. One of the other things that we have to balance, as I said, is if I buy that and it doesn't drop the surface water elevation, because you do need a substantial amount of area to drop that surface elevation to have the impact. There's a benefit to cost. So if we're gonna put $100,000 and I'm gonna get a half-inch drop of surface elevation, sometimes these aren't projects that we invest, but we can look at it.
Plus also because it's so small, then we have to maintain it, and so you get the crews down here, and then you get the crews over there, and the maintenance upkeep is also another factor in the cost.
Not a bad idea. It's just, I don't know how viable it is, but we're gonna mark it down and see if there's anything that comes out of that. With that, I'm gonna close this meeting. That doesn't mean it's over, just for some of y'all that haven't come to a meeting. Staff's here, we'll hang around for 10, 15 minutes. That way, sometimes it's better to have that one-on-one conversation. Some of us don't like group settings. And so my staff already knows we hang around for a little bit so we can hear that conversation one-on-one. But what I want to do is thank our city manager, Ike Twill, and all our commissioners that showed up today. What I'll tell you is it shows you how much the city cares. When a commissioner, our ACM, our city manager show up to a meeting, it's a big thing for us. It doesn't happen all the time, but in this city it does. It's almost, in this city, if there's not a commissioner, you're wondering, what did I do wrong? So I can tell you, we're doing something right, and they're here to hear your interest. And so thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Ike. Thank you, Michelle, for coming out today. And we'll hang around for y'all for questions. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I think, I speak for all of us, and Commissioner, I'll let you jump in if you prefer, but we also appreciate our staff being willing to take time away from their families to come out and spend an evening with our community. It also speaks volumes about how much our staff cares. And so your kind words echo exactly how we feel about you.
Thank you. We'll be here, guys.